Welcome to the Left Seat Student Pilot. I am so thrilled to be your instructor for today's explainer. We're going to completely demystify the normal takeoff. You know, a lot of people think taking off is just pushing the throttle forward and yanking back on the yoke. But honestly, it's a highly calculated step-by-step procedure. It relies on strict situational awareness and, well, a whole lot of physics. So let's dive right in and look at exactly how we transition safely from the ground to the air. Here is our flight plan for today. We've got 6 main phases to cover. First, pre-flight and performance. Second, the TMP fish vital actions. Third, lining up the runway. Fourth, the takeoff roll. Fifth, liftoff and ground effect. And finally, number 6, climbing into the pattern.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, Pre-Flight and Performance.
Before we even think about touching the throttle, we have to consider the sheer number of invisible variables acting on our aircraft. We literally have to calculate how wind direction and strength, the runway length, its surface, and even the slope are going to affect us. Plus, we've got our takeoff weight, center of gravity, the density altitude, which is really just a fancy way of saying temperature and humidity combined, and our flap configuration. All of this affects our ground run distance and our ability to clear obstacles. Think about it. A heavier airplane, or one with a forward center of gravity, way harder to lift off. Thinner air, that severely degrades our engine performance and means we need a much longer takeoff run. And don't forget the runway itself. If there's water, long grass, or an upslope, that's going to add some serious distance to your takeoff roll.
To actually account for all those variables, we rely on our operating handbook's performance charts. Take a Piper Warrior, for example. We use its charts to scientifically prove our takeoff distances. We're not just out here guessing. We track our pressure altitude, the temperature, our weight, and the wind to find our exact, precise liftoff speed and the specific distance we need to clear a standard 50-foot barrier. In aviation, we absolutely do not rely on luck. We rely on hard data.
Moving right along to Section 2, the TMPFSIS Vital Actions. Once we're in the run-up bay, we memorize our pre-takeoff checks using the TMP fish mnemonic device. It sounds a little funny, but it ensures absolutely everything is locked in and ready. First, T for trim. We make sure it's set for takeoff. M is mixture. We ensure it's rich. P is for propeller, if applicable. F is fuel and flaps. We verify fuel is on the proper tank, the pump is on, and flaps are set. I for instruments. Scanning to ensure the attitude indicator is perfectly erect and the altimeter is correctly set. S is for switches. This is where we run the engine up and test the magnetos, looking for a normal, balanced RPM drop to prove those spark plugs are firing exactly like they should. And finally, CNH for controls, hatches, and harnesses, confirming full, free movement of the flight controls and making sure our doors and seatbelts are totally secure. This is literally our very last opportunity to catch a problem. If there is even a shadow of a doubt, we just don't go.
Now let's talk about flap settings for a second. For some aircraft, we only use 10 to 15 degrees of flaps for takeoff. It's a small deflection, but it increases the lifting ability of the wings just enough to shorten our ground roll. But fully extended landing flaps, those cause an incredible amount of drag. You'll literally never use them for takeoff because they will severely and dangerously degrade your ability to climb.
All right, Section 3, lining up the runway.
Right before we actually line up, we do a verbal 10-second review. I always want you to talk out loud in the cockpit. State your expected ground run distance, your liftoff speeds, and your specific emergency abort plans. What do you do if the engine fails on the ground? Well, you instantly close the throttle and brake. What if it fails right after takeoff? You land straight ahead. Mentally preparing for the unexpected in these final 10 seconds dramatically improves your odds of a correct split-second response. It's a total game changer.
As you hold short, you're scanning for traffic, you're clearing the approaches, and you're taking one final careful look at the windsock. You need to verify your crosswind or headwind conditions right before rolling onto the center line. Remember, a headwind is your absolute best friend right now. It gives you the shortest ground run and the absolute best obstacle clearance.
Which brings us to Section 4, the takeoff roll.
Okay, so you're lined up. The crucial point here is exactly how you position your feet. You've got to keep your heels planted firmly on the floor so you are steering strictly with the rudder pedals by sliding your feet forward. You want to completely avoid pressing the top halves of the pedals because that activates the toe brakes. Dragging the brakes while we're trying to accelerate? Yeah, that is a recipe for a blown tire or a very sudden aborted takeoff.
Now, As you push that throttle in with a smooth, steady 1, 2, 3 count, the aircraft is going to want to pull hard to the left. You must counteract this aggressively but smoothly with right rudder. Just pick a reference point all the way at the very end of the runway, keep your eyes glued to it, and track straight down that center line.
Let's break down exactly why that left pull happens. This turning tendency isn't just some magic trick, it's pure physics. First, we have torque reaction from our clockwise rotating propeller. It presses down heavily on our left wheel, which creates more ground friction on the left side. Second, we have the slipstream effect. The spiraling air pushed back by the propeller actually wraps around the fuselage and violently strikes the left side of our tail fin, physically pushing the nose to the left. The only antidote? Good old-fashioned right rudder.
As we're gaining speed down the runway, you need to hold slight back pressure on the yoke. This does two really important things. First, it protects the nose gear from taking a beating on rough surfaces. And second, it prevents a highly dangerous condition we call wheelbarrowing. If you accidentally push forward, the wings start generating lift and raise the main wheels off the runway. Suddenly, that delicate little nose wheel takes the entire weight of the aircraft. That is a fantastic way to completely lose directional control. So slight back pressure keeps us safe.
Let's move to Section 5, Liftoff and Ground Effect.
At this stage, whatever you do, don't force the airplane into the air. Just apply gradual back pressure and let the airplane fly itself off the runway smoothly. Once the main wheels actually leave the pavement, our immediate priority is to maintain a shallow climb. We want to let the aircraft accelerate to our optimal climb speed. If you pitch up way too steeply, way too early, you run the very real risk of settling right back down onto the runway.
Immediately after rotation, we enter what's called ground effect. This is a truly fascinating physical phenomenon. Basically, the runway surface restricts the downwash of air and the wingtip vortices. Fun fact, large birds actually use this trick all the time when they're flying close over water to save energy. For our aircraft, ground effect occurs when we are within about 1 wingspan of altitude above the surface.
The ground literally cushions the air beneath our wings when we're down low, giving us artificially high lift and really low drag. It's like flying on a pocket of air, allowing us to fly at a lower speed momentarily. But you really have to beware here. As we climb out of ground effect, our drag suddenly spikes. We absolutely must ensure we've built enough airspeed and energy while we're in that cushion to successfully climb out of it, or else we could just sink right back down.
And finally, Section 6, Climbing into the Pattern. Now that we're climbing, you need to keep your eyes outside the cockpit. You want to establish your climb attitude relative to the natural horizon. Use your ailerons to maintain wings level, use your rudder to keep the balance ball perfectly centered, and keep your right hand planted firmly on the throttle. You definitely don't want it vibrating back and unexpectedly reducing our power.
As we climb beyond the departure end of the runway and pass 500 feet above ground level, we initiate a gentle climbing turn to our crosswind leg. You want to keep your bank angle to a maximum of 20 degrees. Make sure to allow for wind drift as you turn, constantly keeping your head on a swivel to scan for other traffic before we ultimately level off at our target pattern altitude on the downwind leg.
So, we've covered the physics of torque, ground effect, and all those crucial performance calculations. Taking off is clearly not just pushing a lever. It's a beautifully calculated dance of aerodynamics, checklist discipline, and serious spatial awareness. Now that you understand exactly how factors like torque reaction actively try to pull you off the center line and how ground effect physically cushions your departure, ask yourself, are you ready to take the controls? Keep studying those performance charts, student pilot, and I will see you in the cockpit for our next explainer.